The Beckoning Hand. Etc. Stories by Grant Allen. Strange Stories. The Gold Wulfric. Chapter 1. There are only 2 gold coins of Wulfric of Mercia in existence anywhere. One of them is in the British Museum, and the other one is in my possession. The most terrible incident in the whole course of my career is intimately connected with my first discovery of that gold Wulfric. It is not too much to say that my entire life has been deeply colored by it, and I shall make no apology therefore for narrating the story in some little detail. I was stopping down at Lichfield for my summer holiday in July, 1879, when I happened one day accidentally to meet an old ploughman who told me he had got a lot of coins at home that he had ploughed up on what he called the field of battle, a place I had already recognized as the site of the Mercian king's wooden palace. I went home with him at once in high glee, for I have been a collector of old English gold and silver coinage for several years, and I was in hopes that my friendly ploughman's find might contain something good in the way of Anglo-Saxon pennies or shillings, considering the very promising place in which he had unearthed it. As it turned out, I was not mistaken. The little hoard concealed within a rude piece of Anglo-Saxon pottery, page 75. Now no. 127 in Case LIX, at the South Kensington Museum, comprised a large number of common Frankish Merovingian coins. I beg Mr. Freeman's pardon for not calling them merewings, together with 2 or 3 Kentish pennies of some rarity from the mints of Ethelbert at Canterbury and Dover. Amongst these minor treasures, however, my eye at once fell upon a single gold piece, obviously imitated from the imperial Roman aureus of the pretender Carausius, which I saw immediately must be an almost unique bit of money of the very greatest numismatic interest. I took it up and examined it carefully. A minute's inspection fully satisfied me that it was indeed a genuine mintage of Wulfric of Mercia, the like of which I had never before to my knowledge set eyes upon. I immediately offered the old man £5 down for the whole collection. He closed with the offer forthwith in the most contented fashion, and I bought them and paid for them all upon the spot without further parley. When I got back to my lodgings that evening I could do nothing but look at my gold Wulfric. I was charmed and delighted at the actual possession of so great a treasure, and was burning to take it up at once to the British Museum to see whether even in the national collection they had got another like it. So being by nature of an enthusiastic and impulsive disposition, I determined to go up to town the very next day, and try to track down the history of my Wulfric. It'll be a good opportunity, I said to myself, to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. Emily's people haven't gone out of town yet. I can call there in the morning, arrange to go to the theater with them at night, and then drive at once to the museum and see how much my find is worth. Next morning I was off to town by an early train, and before 1 o'clock I had got to Emily's. "Why, Harold," she cried, running down to meet me and kiss me in the passage, for she had seen me get out of my, page 76, hansom from the drawing-room window. "How on earth is it that you're up in town today? I thought you were down at Lichfield still with your Oxford reading party." "So I am," I answered, "officially at Lichfield, but I've come up today partly to see you, and partly on a piece of business about a new coin I've just got hold of." "A coin?" Emily answered, pretending to pout. "Me and a coin? That's how you link us together mentally, is it? I declare, Harold, I shall be getting jealous of those coins of yours some day, I'm certain. You can't even come up to see me for a day, it seems, unless you've got some matter of a coin as well to bring you to London. Moral: never get engaged to a man with a fancy for collecting coins and medals." "Oh, but this is really such a beauty, Emily," I cried enthusiastically. "Just look at it now. Isn't it lovely? Do you notice the inscription, Wulfric Rex? I've never yet seen one anywhere else at all like it." Emily took it in her hands carelessly. "I don't see any points about that coin in particular," she answered in her bantering fashion, "more than about any other old coin that you'd pick up anywhere." That was all we said then about the matter. Subsequent events ingrained the very words of that short conversation into the inmost substance of my brain with indelible fidelity. I shall never forget them to my dying moment. I stopped about an hour altogether at Emily's, had lunch, and arranged that she and her mother should accompany me that evening to the Lyceum. Then I drove off to the British Museum, and asked for leave to examine the Anglo-Saxon coins of the Mercian period. The superintendent, who knew me well enough by sight and repute as a responsible amateur collector, readily gave me permission to look at a drawerful of the earliest Mercian gold and silver coinage. I had brought one or two, page 77, numismatic books with me, and I sat down to have a good look at those delightful cases. After thoroughly examining the entire series and the documentary evidence, I came to the conclusion that there was just one other gold Wulfric in existence besides the one I kept in my pocket, and that was the beautiful and well-preserved example in the case before me. It was described in the last edition of Sir Theophilus Raxton's Northumbrian and Mercian Numismatist as an absolutely unique gold coin of Wulfric of Mercia, in imitation of the well-known aureus of the false Emperor Carausius. I turned to the catalogue to see the price at which it had been purchased by the nation. To my intense surprise I saw it entered at £150. I was perfectly delighted at my magnificent acquisition. On comparing the two examples, however, I observed that, though both struck from the same die and apparently at the same mint, to judge by the letter, they differed slightly from one another in 2-minute accidental particulars. My coin, being of course merely stamped with a hammer and then cut to shape, after the fashion of the time, was rather more closely clipped round the edge than the museum specimen, and it had also a slight dent on the obverse side, just below the W of Wulfric. In all other respects the two examples were of necessity absolutely identical. I stood for a long time gazing at the case and examining the two duplicates with the deepest interest, while the museum keeper, a man of the name of McTavish, whom I had often seen before on previous visits, walked about within sight, as is the rule on all such occasions, and kept a sharp lookout that I did not attempt to meddle with any of the remaining coins or cases. Unfortunately, as it turned out, I had not mentioned to the superintendent my own possession of a duplicate Wulfric, nor had I called McTavish's attention to the, page 78, fact that I had pulled a coin of my own for purposes of comparison out of my waistcoat pocket. To say the truth, I was inclined to be a little secretive as yet about my gold Wulfric, because until I had found out all that was known about it I did not want anybody else to be told of my discovery. At last I had fully satisfied all my curiosity, and was just about to return the museum Wulfric to its little round compartment in the need case, having already replaced my own duplicate in my waistcoat pocket, when all at once, I can't say how, I gave a sudden start, and dropped the coin with a jerk unexpectedly upon the floor of the museum. It rolled away out of sight in a second, and I stood appalled in an agony of distress and terror in the midst of the gallery. Next moment I had hastily called McTavish to my side, and got him to lock up the open drawer while we two went down on hands and knees and hunted through the length and breadth of the gallery for the lost Wulfric. It was absolutely hopeless. Plain sailing as the thing seemed, we could see no trace of the missing coin from one end of the room to the other. At last I leaned in a cold perspiration against the edge of one of the glass cabinets, and gave it up in despair with a sinking heart. "It's no use, McTavish," I murmured desperately. "The thing's lost, and we shall never find it." McTavish looked me quietly in the face. "In that case, sir," he answered firmly, "by the rules of the museum I must call the superintendent." He put his hand, with no undue violence, but in a strictly official manner, upon my right shoulder. Then he blew a whistle. "I'm sorry to be rude to you, sir," he went on apologetically, "but by the rules of the museum I can't take my hand off you till the superintendent gives me leave to release you." Page 79. Another keeper answered the whistle. "Send the superintendent," McTavish said quietly. "A coin missing?" In a minute the superintendent was upon the spot. When McTavish told him I had dropped the gold Wulfric of Mercia he shook his head very ominously. "This is a bad business, Mr. Tate," he said gloomily. "A unique coin, as you know, and one of the most valuable in the whole of our large Anglo-Saxon collection. Is there a mousehole anywhere?" I cried in agony. "Any place where it might have rolled down, and got mislaid or concealed for the moment?" The superintendent went down instantly on his own hands and knees, pulled up every piece of the cocoanut matting with minute deliberation, searched the whole place thoroughly from end to end, but found nothing. He spent nearly an hour on that thorough search. Meanwhile McTavish never for a moment relaxed his hold upon me. At last the superintendent desisted from the search as quite hopeless, and approached me very politely. "I'm extremely sorry, Mr. Tate," he said in the most courteous possible manner, But by the rules of the museum I am absolutely compelled either to search you for the coin or to give you into custody. It may, you know, have got caught somewhere about your person. No doubt you would prefer, of the two, that I should look in all your pockets and the folds of your clothing. The position was terrible. I could stand it no longer. Mr. Harborne, I said, breaking out once more from head to foot into a cold sweat, I must tell you the truth. I have brought a duplicate gold Wulfric here today to compare with the museum specimen, and I have got it this very moment in my waistcoat pocket. The superintendent gazed back at me with a mingled look of incredulity and pity. My dear sir, he answered very gently, this is altogether a most unfortunate business, but I'm afraid I, page 80, must ask you to let me look at the duplicate you speak of. I took it, trembling, out of my waistcoat pocket, and handed it across to him without a word. The superintendent gazed at it for a moment in silence. Then, in a tone of the profoundest commiseration, he said slowly, Mr. Tate, I grieve to be obliged to contradict you. This is our own specimen of the gold Wulfric. The whole museum whirled round me violently, and before I knew anything more I fainted. Chapter 2. When I came to, I found myself seated in the superintendent's room, with a policeman standing quietly in the background. As soon as I had fully recovered consciousness, the superintendent motioned the policeman out of the room for a while, and then gently forced me to swallow a brandy and soda. Mr. Tate, he said compassionately, after an awkward pause, you are a very young man indeed, and I believe, hitherto of blameless character. Now, I should be very sorry to have to proceed to extremities against you. I know to what lengths, in a moment of weakness, the desire to possess a rare coin will often lead a connoisseur, under stress of exceptional temptation. I have not the slightest doubt in my own mind that you did really accidentally drop this coin, that you went down on your knees honestly intending to find it, that the accident suggested to you the ease with which you might pick it up and proceed to pocket it, that you yielded temporarily to that unfortunate impulse, and that by the time I arrived upon the scene you were already overcome with remorse and horror. I saw as much immediately in your very countenance. Nevertheless, I determined to give, page 81, you the benefit of the doubt, and I searched over the whole place in the most thorough and conscientious manner. As you know, I found nothing. Mr. Tate, I cannot bear to have to deal harshly with you. I recognize the temptation and the agony of repentance that instantly followed it. Sir, I give you one chance. If you will retract the obviously false story that you just now told me, and confess that the coin I found in your pocket was in fact, as I know it to be, the museum specimen, I will forthwith dismiss the constable, and will never say another word to any one about the whole matter. I don't want to ruin you, but I can't, of course, be put off with a falsehood. Think the matter carefully over with yourself. Do you or do you not still adhere to that very improbable and incredible story? Horrified and terror-stricken as I was, I couldn't avoid feeling grateful to the superintendent for the evident kindness with which he was treating me. The tears rose at once into my eyes. Mr. Harborne, I cried passionately, you are very good, very generous. But you quite mistake the whole position. The story I told you was true, every word of it. I bought that gold Wulfric from a plowman at Lichfield, and it is not absolutely identical with the museum specimen which I dropped upon the floor. It is closer clipped round the edges, and it has a distinct dent upon the obverse side, just below the W of Wulfric. The superintendent paused a second, and scanned my face very closely. Have you a knife or a file in your pocket? He asked in a much sterner and more official tone. No, I replied. Neither. You are sure? Certain. Shall I search you myself, or shall I give you in custody? Page 82. Search me yourself, I answered confidently. He put his hand quietly into my left-hand breast pocket, and to my utter horror and dismay drew forth, what I had up to that moment utterly forgotten, a pair of folding pocket nail scissors, in a leather case, of course with a little file on either side. My heart stood still within me. That is quite sufficient, Mr. Tate, the superintendent went on severely. Had you alleged that the museum coin was smaller than your own imaginary one, you might have been able to put in the facts as good evidence. But I see the exact contrary is the case. You have stooped to a disgraceful and unworthy subterfuge. This base deception aggravates your guilt. You have deliberately defaced a valuable specimen in order, if possible, to destroy its identity. What could I say in return? I stammered and hesitated. Mr. Harborne, I cried piteously. The circumstances seem to look terribly against me. But nevertheless, you are quite mistaken. Though missing Wulfric will come to light sooner or later and prove me innocent. He walked up and down the room once or twice irresolutely, and then he turned round to me with a very fixed and determined aspect which fairly terrified me. Mr. Tate, he said, I am straining every point possible to save you, but you make it very difficult for me by your continued falsehood. I am doing quite wrong in being so lenient to you. I am proposing, in short, to compound a felony. But I cannot bear, without letting you have just one more chance, to give you in charge for a common robbery. I will let you have 10 minutes to consider the matter, and I beseech you, I beg of you, I implore you to retract this absurd and despicable lie before it is too late forever. Just consider that if you refuse I shall have to hand you over to the constable out there, page 83, and that the whole truth must come out in court, and must be blazoned forth to the entire world in every newspaper. The policeman is standing here by the door. I will leave you alone with your own thoughts for 10 minutes. As he spoke he walked out gravely, and shut the door solemnly behind him. The clock on the chimney-piece pointed with its hands to 20 minutes past 3. It was an awful dilemma. I hardly knew how to act under it. On the one hand, if I admitted for the moment that I had tried to steal the coin, I could avoid all immediate unpleasant circumstances, and as it would be sure to turn up again in cleaning the museum, I should be able at last to prove my innocence to Mr. Harborne's complete satisfaction. But on the other hand, the lie, for it was a lie, stuck in my throat. I could not humble myself to say I had committed a mean and dirty action which I loathed with all the force and energy of my nature. No, no! Come what would of it, I must stick by the truth, and trust to that to clear up everything. But if the superintendent really insisted on giving me in charge, how very awkward to have to telegraph about it to Emily. Fancy saying to the girl you are in love with, I can't go with you to the theater this evening, because I have been taken off to jail on a charge of stealing a valuable coin from the British Museum. It was too terrible. Yet, after all, I thought to myself, if the worst comes to the worst, Emily will have faith enough in me to know it is ridiculous. And indeed, the imputation could in any case only be temporary. As soon as the thing gets into court I could bring up the Lichfield ploughman to prove my possession of a gold Wulfric, and I could bring up Emily to prove that I had shown it to her that very morning. How lucky that I had happened to take it out and let her look at it! My case was, happily, as plain as a page 84 pikestaff. It was only momentarily that the weight of the evidence seemed so perversely to go against me. Turning over all these various considerations in my mind with anxious hesitancy, the 10 minutes managed to pass away almost before I had thoroughly realized the deep gravity of the situation. As the clock on the chimney-piece pointed to the half-hour, the door opened once more, and the superintendent entered solemnly. Well, Mr. Tate, he said in an anxious voice, have you made up your mind to make a clean breast of it? Do you now admit, after full deliberation, that you have endeavored to steal and clip the gold Wulfric? No, I answered firmly. I do not admit it, and I will willingly go before a jury of my countrymen to prove my innocence. Then God help you, poor boy, the superintendent cried despondently. I have done my best to save you, and you will not let me. Policeman, this is your prisoner. I give him in custody on a charge of stealing a gold coin, the property of the trustees of this museum, valued at £175 sterling. The policeman laid his hand upon my wrist. You will have to go along with me to the station, sir, he said quietly. Terrified and stunned as I was by the awfulness of the accusation, I could not forget or overlook the superintendent's evident reluctance and kindness. Mr. Harborne, I cried, you have tried to do your best for me. I am grateful to you for it, in spite of your terrible mistake, and I shall yet be able to show you that I am innocent. He shook his head gloomily. I have done my duty, he said with a shudder. I have never before had a more painful one. Policeman, I must ask you now to do yours. Page 85. Chapter 3. The police are always considerate to respectable-looking prisoners, and I had no difficulty in getting the sergeant in charge of the lockup to telegraph for me to Emily, to say that I was detained by important business, which would prevent me taking her and her mother to the theater that evening. But when I explained to him that my detention was merely temporary, and that I should be able to disprove the whole story as soon as I went before the magistrates, he winked most unpleasantly at the constable who had brought me in, and observed in a tone of vulgar sarcasm, "We have a good many gentlemen here who says the same, sir, don't we, Jim? But they don't always find it so easy as they expected when they stands up afore the beak to prove their statements." I began to reflect that even a temporary prison is far from being a pleasant place for a man to stop in. Next morning they took me up before the magistrate, and as the museum authorities of course proved a prima facie case against me, and as my solicitor advised me to reserve my defense, owing to the difficulty of getting up my witness from Lichfield in reasonable time, I was duly committed for trial at the next sessions of the Central Criminal Court. I had often read before that people had been committed for trial, but till that moment I had no idea what a very unpleasant sensation it really is. However, as I was a person of hitherto unblemished character, and wore a good coat made by a fashionable tailor, the magistrate decided to admit me to bail, if 2 sureties and £500 each were promptly forthcoming for the purpose. Luckily, I had no difficulty in finding friends who believed in my story, and as I felt sure the lost Wulfric would soon be found in cleaning, page 86, the museum, I suffered perhaps a little less acutely than I might otherwise have done, owing to my profound confidence in the final triumph of the truth. Nevertheless, as the case would be fully reported next morning in all the papers, I saw at once that I must go straight off and explain the matter without delay to Emily. I will not dwell upon that painful interview. I will only say that Emily behaved as I of course knew she would behave. She was horrified and indignant at the dreadful accusation, and woman-like, she was very angry with the superintendent. "He ought to have taken your word for it, naturally, Harold," she cried through her tears. "But what a good thing, anyhow, that you happened to show the coin to me. I should recognize it anywhere among 10,000. "That's well, darling," I said, trying to kiss away her tears and cheer her up a little. "I haven't the slightest doubt that when the trial comes we shall be able triumphantly to vindicate me from this terrible, groundless accusation." Chapter 4. When the trial did actually come on, the museum authorities began by proving their case against me in what seemed the most horribly damning fashion. The superintendent proved that on such and such a day, in such and such a case, he had seen a gold coin of Wulfric of Mercia, the property of the museum. He and McTavish detailed the circumstances under which the coin was lost. The superintendent explained how he had asked me to submit to a search, and how, to avoid that indignity, I had myself produced from my waistcoat pocket a gold coin of Wulfric of Mercia, which I asserted to be a duplicate specimen, and my own property. The page 87 counsel for the Crown proceeded thus with the examination. "Do you recognize the coin I now hand you?" "I do." "What is it?" "The unique gold coin of Wulfric of Mercia, belonging to the museum." "You have absolutely no doubt as to its identity?" "Absolutely none whatsoever." "Does it differ in any respect from the same coin as you previously saw it?" "Yes." "It has been clipped round the edge with a sharp instrument, and a slight dent has been made by pressure on the obverse side, just below the W of Wulfric." "Did you suspect the prisoner at the bar of having mutilated it?" "I did, and I asked him whether he had a knife in his possession. He answered no. I then asked him whether he would submit to be searched for a knife. He consented, and on my looking in his pocket I found the pair of nail scissors I now produce, with a small file on either side." "Do you believe the coin might have been clipped with those scissors?" "I do. The gold is very soft, having little alloy in its composition, and it could easily be cut by a strong-wristed man with a knife or scissors." As I listened, I didn't wonder that the jury looked as if they already considered me guilty, but I smiled to myself when I thought how utterly Emily's and the ploughman's evidence would rebut this unworthy suspicion. The next witness was the museum cleaner. His evidence at first produced nothing fresh, but just at last counsel set before him a paper, containing a few scraps of yellow metal, and asked him triumphantly whether he recognized them. He answered yes, page 88. There was a profound silence. The court was interested and curious. I couldn't quite understand it all, but I felt a terrible sinking. "What are they?" asked the hostile barrister. They are some fragments of gold which I found in shaking the coconut manning on the floor of Gallery 27 the Saturday after the attempted theft. I felt as if a mine had unexpectedly been sprung beneath me. How on earth those fragments of soft gold could ever have got there I couldn't imagine, but I saw the damaging nature of this extraordinary and inexplicable coincidence in half a second. My counsel cross-examined all the witnesses for the prosecution, but failed to elicit anything of any value from any one of them. On the contrary, his questions put to the metallurgist of the Mint, who was called to prove the quality of the gold, only brought out a very strong opinion to the effect that the clippings were essentially similar in character to the metal composing the clipped Wulfric. No wonder the jury seemed to think the case was going decidedly against me. Then my counsel called his witnesses. I listened in the profoundest suspense and expectation. The first witness was the ploughman from Lichfield. He was a well-meaning but very puzzle-headed old man, and he was evidently frightened at being confronted by so many clever wig-wearing barristers. Nevertheless, my counsel managed to get the true story out of him at last with infinite patience, dexterity, and skill. The old man told us finally how he had found the coins and sold them to me for £5, and how one of them was of gold, with a queer head and goggle eyes pointed full face upon its surface. When he had finished, the counsel for the Crown began his cross-examination. He handed the ploughman a gold, page 89, coin. "Did you ever see that before?" he asked quietly. "To be sure I did," the man answered, looking at it open-mouthed. "What is it?" "It's the bit I sold Mr. Tate there, the bit as I got out o' the old basin." Counsel turned triumphantly to the judge. "My lord," he said, "this thing to which the witness swears is a gold piece of Ethelwulf of Wessex, by far the commonest and cheapest gold coin of the whole Anglo-Saxon period. It was handed to the jury side by side with the Wulfric of Mercia, and the difference, as I knew myself, was in fact extremely noticeable. All that the old man could have observed in common between them must have been merely the archaic Anglo-Saxon character of the coinage. As I heard that, I began to feel that it was really all over. My counsel tried on the re-examination to shake the old man's faith in his identification, and to make him transfer his story to the Wulfric which he had actually sold me. But it was all in vain. The ploughman had clearly the dread of perjury forever before his eyes, and wouldn't go back for any consideration upon his first sworn statement. "No, no, mister," he said over and over again in reply to my counsel's bland suggestion. "You ain't going to make me forswear myself for all your cleverness." The next witness was Emily. She went into the box pale and red-eyed, but very confident. My counsel examined her admirably, and she stuck to her point with womanly persistence, that she had herself seen the clipped Wulfric, and no other coin, on the morning of the supposed theft. She knew it was so, because she distinctly remembered the inscription, Wulfric Rex, and the peculiar, page 90, way the staring open eyes were represented with barbaric puerility. Counsel for the Crown would only trouble the young lady with two questions. The first was a painful one, but it must be asked in the interests of justice. Were she and the prisoner at the bar engaged to be married to one another? The answer came, slowly and timidly. Yes. Counsel drew a long breath, and looked her hard in the face. Could she read the inscription on that coin now produced, handing her the Ethelwulf? Great heavens! I saw at once the plot to disconcert her, but was utterly powerless to warn her against it. Emily looked at it long and steadily. "No," she said at last, growing deadly pale and grasping the woodwork of the witness box convulsively. "I don't know the character in which it is written." Of course not, for the inscription was in the peculiar semi-runic Anglo-Saxon letters. She had never read the words, Wulfric Rex, either. I had read them to her, and she had carried them away vaguely in her mind, imagining no doubt that she herself had actually deciphered them. There was a slight pause, and I felt my blood growing cold within me. Then the counsel for the Crown handed her again the genuine Wulfric, and asked her whether the letters upon it which she professed to have read were or were not similar to those of the Ethelwulf. Instead of answering, Emily bent down her head between her hands, and burst suddenly into tears. I was so much distressed at her terrible agitation that I forgot altogether for the moment my own perilous position, and I cried aloud, my lord, will you not interpose to spare her any further questions? I think, the judge said to the counsel for the Crown. You might now permit the witness to stand down. Page 91. I wish to re-examine, my lord, my counsel put in hastily. No, I said in his ear. No. Whatever comes of it, not another question. I had far rather go to prison than let her suffer this inexpressible torture for a single minute longer. Emily was led down, still crying bitterly, into the body of the court, and the rest of the proceedings went on uninterrupted. The theory of the prosecution was a simple and plausible one. I had bought a common Anglo-Saxon coin, probably an Ethelwulf, valued at about 22 shillings, from the old Lichfield ploughman. I had thereupon conceived the fraudulent idea of pretending that I had a duplicate of the rare Wulfric. I had shown the Ethelwulf, clipped in a particular fashion, to the lady whom I was engaged to marry. I had then defaced and altered the genuine Wulfric at the museum into the same shape with the aid of my pocket nail scissors. And I had finally made believe to drop the coin accidentally upon the floor, while I had really secreted it in my waistcoat pocket. The theory for the defense had broken down utterly. And then there was the damning fact of the gold scrapings found in the cocoanut matting of the British Museum, which was to me the one great inexplicable mystery in the whole otherwise comprehensible mystification. I felt myself that the case did indeed look very black against me. But would a jury venture to convict me on such very doubtful evidence? The jury retired to consider their verdict. I stood in suspense in the dock, with my heart loudly beating. Emily remained in the body of the court below, looking up at me tearfully and penitently. After 20 minutes the jury retired. Guilty or not guilty? The foreman answered aloud. Guilty. Page 92. There was a piercing cry in the body of the court, and in a moment Emily was carried out half fainting and half hysterical. The judge then calmly proceeded to pass sentence. He dwelt upon the enormity of my crime in one so well connected and so far removed from the dangers of mere vulgar temptations. He dwelt also upon the vandalism of which I had been guilty, myself a collector, in clipping and defacing a valuable and unique memorial of antiquity, the property of the nation. He did not wish to be severe upon a young man of hitherto blameless character, but the national collection must be secured against such a peculiarly insidious and cunning form of depredation. The sentence of the court was that I should be kept in 5 years' penal servitude. Crushed and annihilated as I was, I had still strength to utter a single final word. My lord, I cried, the missing Wulfric will yet be found, and will hereafter prove my perfect innocence. Remove the prisoner, said the judge coldly. They took me down to the courtyard unresisting, where the prison van was standing in waiting. On the steps I saw Emily and her mother, both crying bitterly. They had been told the sentence already, and were waiting to take a last farewell of me. Oh, Harold! Emily cried, flinging her arms around me wildly. It's all my fault! It's my fault only! By my foolish stupidity I've lost your case. I've sent you to prison. Oh, Harold, I can never forgive myself. I've sent you to prison. I've sent you to prison. Dearest, I said, it won't be for long. I shall soon be free again. They'll find the Wulfric sooner or later, and then of course they'll let me out again. Harold, she cried. Oh, Harold, Harold, don't you see? Don't you understand? This is a plot against you, page 93. It isn't lost. It isn't lost. That would be nothing. It's stolen, it's stolen. A light burst in upon me suddenly, and I saw in a moment the full depth of the peril that surrounded me.